In this lecture, I'm going to encourage you to translate the rest of the app. We've covered everything related to integrating internationalization into an app. We aren't going to translate the rest of the app together because it would be too redundant. So, if you'd like, as an exercise, try translating the app on your own. Let's go over how you would translate the rest of the app. We'll do one translation together. In our project, we have two directories that house our components. Components are responsible for rendering content. Let's open the Manage component file in the Views directory. The first step you would take is looking through the template to find static text. In the component file, we'll find some static text inside the span element with the class card title. The next thing we need to figure out is what kind of translation we'll need to use. Throughout this section, we encountered various ways to translate text. The static text in this element is very plain. I don't think we need to use anything extreme. A basic translation will work. Open the English translation file. In this file, we're going to add a new translation. We'll add a new path called manage.mysongs. The translation will be for the Manage component. We'll nest it inside the Manage object of our translation file. This input will add the translation to our list of translations. We'll modify the translation by adding the phrase My Songs under the Messages column. The next step is to add messages to the other locales. Our app has a locale for the French language. Let's switch over to the French file. In this file, add the manage.mysongs path to the object. We'll quickly grab the translation for this path by translating the phrase My Songs with Google Translate. After grabbing the translation, we'll use this translation for the path. Alright, the last step is to apply the translation to the component. We'll change the static text to an expression. The expression will be the following: $T manage.mysongs. The $T function will take care of translating the text. Let's test the application. Navigate to the Manage page. I'll click on the link for toggling the language. As I do so, the language will toggle without a problem. This is the overall process you'll go through for translating messages. Just repeat these steps and you'll be good to go. I wish you good luck with translating the rest of the application.